copy of the audio.
No. So he didn't even have the audio.
So he might have seen it on live streaming, maybe.
Okay, sorry about the delay. I declare this meeting open at 7:06, which is unusually late for us. I ask you to please rise for the opening prayer. And Mr Hartley, would you please remove your cap? Thank you. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, work and visit the city of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please remain standing as on behalf of the city of Burnside I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who gave their life for this country and its people. We also acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians on whose ancestral lands we meet. We recognise their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. Thank you. And I welcome members of the gallery to this meeting, and we have quite a few. I ask them please to observe in respectful silence as the Chamber deliberates on matters that relate to the administration of this city. And I take the opportunity to remind elected members and members of the public that all council meetings are recorded and are live streamed now through the City of Burnside website. Should there be a fire or any other emergency, an alarm will sound, and please follow the directions of council staff. We have an apology from Councillor Rostock, and we have Councillor Bools on leave of absence. The minutes of the meeting held 24th of July have been distributed to you. Can I have a recommendation that they be taken as read and confirmed? Move Councillor Piggott, seconded Councillor Davis. All those in favour, against, carried. My report, the Mayor's report, was distributed with the meeting papers and agenda. Any questions on that report? Can I have a recommendation, please, that that report be received? Move Councillor Davies, seconded Councillor Cornish. All those in favour, against, carried. I would now, on item 7, I will go around the chamber for reports from members, beginning with Councillor Monceau.
On Sunday afternoon, there was an excellent segment featuring Ben Seamark, one of our staff, talking about tree canopy, talking about the urban forest, the use of technology to track and to identify trees within Burnside area, and he also talked about, mentioned the count that Burnside has done of the 36,000 trees and the loss of 10% of that canopy cover over the last few, since the count took place. So I just really thought it was a really excellent little segment on television, and I hope we can get a copy of it and perhaps put it on our website.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. As printed, given we've got a gallery, I might...
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
It's only proper that I speak to it. I attended a council workshop prior to last council, 2 meetings of the community, the CEO recruitment and appraisal remuneration committee. One was on the 30th of July and the other one was last night. The high point was actually coming and getting a demonstration from staff. They've got a piece of software that flew us, both my co-councillor Di and I came, and we had the most fantastic experience of being flown through the new Glenside depot on Conningham Street, which was great. And I met with Vicky Chapman about proposed planning legislation and my concerns for Burnside.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkins.
I attended with Councillor Monceau and the Mayor, the tour of the Era Water facility, which is most impressive, I have to say, out at Campbelltown. The Laurel Avenue plant sale on the 4th of August. I also attended the confidential briefing prior to the council on 24th of July and the fly-through on the 2nd of August. And at that same night, Councillor Davey and I met at Constable Hyde Park and walked through the park with staff, and I thank them for the work they've put into that repurposing of the park. And lastly, what else did I do? Oh, a board meeting for Burnside Retirement Services, which is Pineview Village, and the council assessment panel, which was the 7th of August. And last Saturday, I was one of the supporters, one of many parents and friends and grandparents who attended the Glenunga Rams Juniors at Goodwood Oval, which is not a patch on the oval at Glenunga. I have to say, it was a mudslide.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I attended the confidential briefing before the last council meeting on the 24th of July. I went to the native plants sale at Laurel Avenue Nursery on the 4th of August, which was very successful, and I agree with the previous comments. I think just a small charge for people to buy the plants was very worthwhile, and I believe there was a trickle of attendance throughout the whole day, and there were very good sales, so it was lovely to see all the work being utilised and picked up by locals. I attended a Burnside Hospital Board Quality Committee meeting, and I had several meetings with the administration, including, as Councillor Wilkins mentioned, on the final design plans for Constable Hyde upgrade, and several meetings with local constituents over the last few weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Lord, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Parkin. Yes, I attended both of the CEO Recruitment, Performance Appraisal and Remuneration Committee meetings and the workshop tonight on Era Water.
Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I just attended the ERA Water workshop tonight.
Thank you. We move, and I just remind elected members that live streaming, you cannot be heard unless your microphone is on, so please, I will do my best to make sure that you remember, but I often forget myself. Deputations. The Glenunga Football Club wishes to give us a deputation tonight. Ben Stapleton and Richard Kelly, I presume they're here. I invite you to come forward to take your seats there. You may press the microphone to speak, and the rules of engagement, I'm sure you've been told, you have 5 minutes, and you'll get a warning bell after 4 if you get that far, but then please, there may be questions, so please wait for us. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. Just by way of introduction, I'm Ben Stapleton, father of 3 boys at Glenunga and a volunteer, secretary of the football club. I'd like to thank you, Mayor, council officers, councillors and CEO for enabling this tonight.
Richard Kelly, father of 4 children that play football at Glenunga, 2 boys, 2 girls. Have been there at the club for about 8 years, since the old brown building in the northwestern pocket to the beautiful facilities today. So I've seen the growth and the changes over time.
Okay, so just before we get underway, I've put some reading material in front of you. It contains the slides that we're going to talk through, but 4 sort of fact sheets or information sheets that just provides a bit more supporting information to the context, given we've only got 5 minutes. So, okay, so we'll get underway. So we want to talk to you today about the growth of AFL junior football within the council area, within the city of Burnside, and in particular with the Glenunga Rams Football Club. The situation as it stands has been there's a real demographic shift in the in this area of the city, of the city of Adelaide. And the club environment that we've created has been able to attract and create a really environment of safety, healthy pursuits and a real community connection. And I don't think there's any coincidence with the fact that the hub has opened during this period since 2016, and the ability to attract people to the club and that environment. So that's driven growth from both male and female junior football participants. When you couple growth plus the lack of choice, so we are the only junior football club within the city of Burnside, and only one of 2 football clubs within the area. The other is Pembroke Old Scholars. So there's one oval, and essentially we've outgrown the facility. We're bursting at the seams and outgrown the facility. What we're putting forward to council is to consider over the course of operations for a longer term licence, a 5-year licence, but the terms of that licence to include Webb Oval, which we currently have a licence for, a winter licence, and expanding that to Margaret Bond Oval, which is on the northern side of the hub building. We believe that the tentacles and the connection of the football club working in partnership with council over a long period of time can create amazing things for the community participants within the city, and we would also actively facilitate broader use and maximising the use and the benefit of the asset to others that want to use that facility. So in terms of the demand, so we now have 682 juniors, over 140 seniors, so we're looking at 850 playing members. 162 of those are females and young girls. 2 years ago, the number was 0. So, the active involvement of female and growth of female football has really seen the demand grow. 32 teams, 1 oval. They don't go. It doesn't fit. If you look at then the Burnside residents tied to the football club, there's well over 1,000 if you look at the parents, and then if you expand the tentacles to neighbours, friends, grandparents, we believe that the tentacles within the city is probably closer to 2,000 to 3,000 in terms of people that have a connection, an immediate connection to the football club within the council area. The SANFL has done some analysis, and they believe there's a need for 6 ovals within the city of Burnside. The demand's going to continue. We've got Glenside on the way over a number of years, which is 500 metres from the hub facility. So the demand's going to continue. I think it's important to understand that the culture and the philosophy at the Glenunga Football Club is about participation, making it available and accessible for anyone who wants to come and play football. It's not elitist. There are a number of other clubs that run selection trials and then move people on if they don't make the grade. Our philosophy is about giving anyone who wants to participate in an active, healthy pursuit and their families the opportunity to be part of a great community. The impact of this, though, is it's driven facility limitations. So female change rooms, we've got a significant crossover of boy up to 16 years old and girls up to 16 years old using a limited change facility and co-using facilities, which is not ideal. Match day and training experience, we now operate over 4 ovals, Vic Park, Langman Reserve, Seymour College. There's 25 of our junior teams do never get to play at Webb Oval. It's seen a significant impact on Village Green, so their takings or foot traffic has been half this year due to the nature of having to move everyone away, and facilities are quite poor in those other ovals. From a long-term partnership, we think there's fantastic opportunity to join with council, support local business. We think we're looking at presenting something to council around an electronic scoreboard that could be used by all members, all users, and have movie nights through summer for anyone in the community to come and enjoy. So that's the sort of thing that we think we can do with a longer-term partnership, and we'd love to work more closely with council to explore those opportunities. We know Old Ignatian Soccer Club are currently there, but we actually have had to negotiate with them this year and pay $3,600, almost their entire licence for the year, to get 2 hours of access on a Friday night at the hub. That's a significant amount, and especially when those facilities are underutilised or not utilised on a Friday or a Sunday.
Your time has expired. Are you nearly finished?
I'm almost finished, yeah.
Okay, you finished.
And that's to provide access to female change rooms and on a Friday night for 2 hours for 7 and 8 year olds. We have done some work and spoken to St Ignatius College, so they have accessible facilities up at Athelston on a Saturday and a Sunday for them to play, and we would offer, under the proposed licence agreement, for them to train at Glenunga Tuesdays and Thursdays for free. We wouldn't ask for there wouldn't be a cost penalty. So we'd still facilitate their use for training, but we would look to provide, more direct access and better use of the overall facility. So in summary,
I'm sure you'll get some questions which will aid to summarise, because I'll ask you the first question. Clearly this is centred around the St Ignatius Club and your preference to take over that site. And the offer that you have put before them, I think, is that provided that they're welcome to train there, but it'd be nice if they took their own home facilities and vacated that on a Saturday. Is that roughly where you're at?
Yeah, so we would also be able to accommodate them to use it on a Saturday because our senior teams play on Webb Oval. Sundays is when their junior program plays, but we would, at the moment on the current arrangement, we have to negotiate directly with Old Ignatians just to get training time and use on a Sunday. We were denied use on a Sunday this year, so
okay.
yeah.
So, are you able to come to your own arrangement with that club, or is that something in fact we have if they came to a satisfactory arrangement? I'll ask the administration. Is that something we would be happy with, or is it more complicated than that?
Through your worship, on the hop a little bit. This is the first that we've seen this particular proposal as the administration.
I'm really answering you in theory, not in practice.
Yeah.
Given that there are two subtenants or two tenants.
Yep.
If a tenant wants to make an arrangement with a tenant with another tenant, and they're both happy with it, what is our role?
In theory, yes. We would still be responsible for ensuring that the sports fields are not used excessively, and which could potentially deteriorate the condition of the oval. But in theory, potentially, then that's something we'd have to consider.
For questions? Who have we got here?
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in. It's really interesting. I'm absolutely really interested in the fact that you've got so many girls starting to play. And that's the question, although 520 boys and only 162 girls, we're looking, when are you looking, there's two questions, when do you reckon you might get equality? And the second question I've got is, you said you had 140 seniors. Do you have a women's team in your seniors?
Yeah. At this stage, we don't have a women's team in the seniors. The girls' program is only 2 years old, whereas the boys' program is, well, it's been going at Glenunga for about sort of 12 or 13 years or so. I think the advent of the AFL women's competition sort of 2 or 3 years ago helped the explosion of female football. If you look at the younger end of our playing group, we have 2 under 8s, 2 under 10s, 2 under 12s, 1 under 14s and 1 under 16s, and we've got an under 7s program that has just started as well. So, look, I would expect that number, look, it's a bit hard to put a timeline on it when it would be equal, but I'd expect it to keep growing and become a bit more equitable over time. Yep.
Councillor Monso?
I just wanted to say, commend you for the growth of the club. Obviously, you're doing a good thing. Obviously, the facilities that have been provided there have also induced members to come and be there and use the facility. So, first of all, it's really, I'm very strong on involvement in the development of community, and a club is the basis of all of those things. And as Councillor Wilkins has mentioned, you know, it's the extension beyond just the players when that happens. And I think the main thing I just want to really, it's not a question, it's to say that the concern is it highlights the problem that we have in the eastern suburbs, not only for your sport, but for many other sports that need open space, need ovals. And we are desperate in the eastern suburbs for more ovals. You mentioned Glenside. I thought that oval was no longer going to be made available.
No, the point
we're houses, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the point we're making is that the population growth will probably be there again,
And that
which
growth,
will put more pressure on it.
additional growth.
Yeah, so look, the plan with Margaret Bond Oval, the one down the bottom,
Used to play hockey on it.
is to put 2 ovals actually on there for
Yes.
junior football. You only need a size of 100 metres per oval for junior football, so that will actually give us 3 ovals at Margaret Bond. Potentially you could run another oval east-west as well down the bottom there, so play under 8s to under 12s down there, make it a girls' hub, and you could play under 14 girls east-west as well. The SNFL have given us some funding to help facilitate that from a goalpost and infrastructure perspective. So yeah, look, that would give us 2 ovals, effectively 3 ovals there on a Sunday to utilise.
Councillor Pickett.
Thanks. Yeah, a couple of questions. What did St Nations say when you put that? Are they up for that?
Look, we've been talking to St Nations for probably 2 or 3 years now.
Right.
Look, they have some challenges in what they require from a pitch perspective. I think, as what Barry was saying before, as to the state of the pitch to play on a Saturday.
Right.
Look, I think, and we understand that. We hope the solution we've put today with regards, training there, because the school does not have lights for them to train and they need to train. Hopefully the solution of playing up at the school is one that we could look at. We are more than happy to share it on a Saturday. We don't require it on a Saturday afternoon. The club could play there, but then it's just the question of condition of the oval. I think where we're coming from is that there is a great hub there, there's a great facility there, and it's being underutilised. And there's some restrictions on the lease that's been there.
Well, that,
it's fair to say it's being utilised almost as much as it can be, given the state of the goes downhill if you use it more.
Well, no, it's perfectly fine for AFL football, the actual Margaret Bond Ovals itself, right across winter season. If you look at the traffic that's on Webb Oval compared to Margaret Bond Oval, but for soccer purposes, it's not, no. And I think the training there once or twice a week is probably all that it can allow to make sure the pitch is in the right state for soccer.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Could I just do one last one?
Oh, okay.
Is if you were able to get the use of both ovals, does that do the job? Does that get all your teams back onto an oval, or you still need
So we think that would go a long way. We do have an arrangement with Seymour College that we could utilise, but we believe that would cover, we think, in the current state, cover all Sunday matches that we would need. Yep. And I think then that offsets any need to perhaps have further short-term investment in other facilities that we might need to look at, or council might need to look at.
Councillor Davis.
My question is why 5 years and not perhaps longer?
That's a good question. We'd be happy to take much longer. I think the initial lease, as sort of the hub was opened and bedding down, and we could understand there was a 3-year sort of on a 1+1+1 arrangement, which was fine to I guess to work through any teething issues as the hub bedded down. So we are looking for a longer term arrangement so that we can confidently, and council can confidently, work more together around a partnership. And 5 years, we think, gives us at least the opportunity to look a bit further into the future.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, but yeah, you'd be interested in a longer one if it was available.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Councillor Ford.
Thanks. Well, congratulations, as has been mentioned by others. Is there any likelihood that other unmentionable codes would have to be considered in the washout from all this?
Other sporting codes? Well, there's actually no reason with that Margaret Bond facility that it couldn't be multi-purpose. And the way you could actually line mark the oval could be white for football and black for soccer or whatever. The school also has a need for soccer pitches, which is a bit restrictive for them at the moment. So look, there is no reason why it cannot be a multi-purpose oval. If you wanted to put rugby goals up there, goalposts these days are portable. Soccer goalposts are portable. Football goalposts are portable. I'm sure you could do the same with rugby.
Okay. Thank you for your deputation. I suggest that you begin a dialogue with our administration. As you would know, these matters are actually delegated by us unless there is something that cannot be resolved or needs a policy matter and would come back to us. But good luck in your endeavours.
Thank you for your time.
We have no petitions. There are no questions on notice. Thank you. Thank you. There are no motions on notice. Any questions without notice? Councillor Davis, you wish to run a motion without notice, which I'm happy to let you do.
Thank you. The motion's quite simple. The dog and cat management plan, as well as the bylaws associated with it, are planning to come back at the next meeting of council. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'll be away on my honeymoon and I won't be here then. And so a lot of my constituents have consulted with me and I've met with a lot of them, and I was hoping to push those reports that they came back in the first meeting of September so that I can represent my constituents on these matters.
So your request is that
the
two matters be presented. Have you actually got a motion there?
Yeah, I do. I'll read it out. That the consultation on the dog and cat management plan and associated bylaws be brought to council on 11 September 2018.
My question to the administration is, when was it scheduled to be brought to us?
Through the chair, both of those reports were scheduled to come back on the 28th of August. The reason for that was to ensure that we weren't putting both of these up for adoption on the last council meeting before caretaker period, so it gave us an extra council meeting in case any changes were required. The dog and cat management plan, as long as that's adopted by council, that actually won't come into force until next year anyway, so there's no issue delaying that one. However, the bylaw one is a little bit tight. We have to wait about 4 months before that becomes enforceable through the different processes that it has to go through. The current bylaws expire in January 2019, so the preference is to get those in and adopted as soon as possible so we can start that process. But it's, in theory, providing they all go through and are adopted in September, it would be fine. It's just the risk of them not being so.
And in the event that they are not adopted, what are the consequences?
Through the chair, in theory, our bylaws will have expired in January, so we'll have no way of enforcing any issues that would normally be in contravention of those bylaws.
So the current bylaws would have expired, they don't go on, we actually have to renew them?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
All right.
The dog and cat management plan is fine as long as we've adopted it. That's no trouble. But it's the bylaws then.
Well, councillors, there's a motion before you. I'm happy to. You wish to speak to it, or have you done all the speaking to it you wish to speak?
Well, it's quite simply that I wish to be present at the meeting, to represent my constituents on this issue.
Well, I guess we need to debate the matter. The issue is the risk of not agreeing on it more important than having Councillor Davis here to be part of it? And I seek a seconder for the matter. Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, I'm happy to second. I only just heard it for the first time just now.
Without notice?
Sorry?
Without notice, Councillor Piggott.
Hence the name. However, I'm happy to second it. I do feel that I was aware of the work that Councillor Davis has done in regard to my pretty modest
I pressed the one to speak, or to put myself, to get in the queue.
Right, now I'm on, yeah. Yeah, I'm aware of the work that Councillor Davis has done in this respect. I am aware that probably we've all had quite a number of constituents actually contact us in regard to this, and it is something of pretty significant interest. I think we would be better served to have more rather than less debated on the night, and he does have a good excuse, given he's dropped in the word honeymoon. I've been here for 8 years. I can't remember too many times actually when this chamber didn't accept something in some form. We don't always accept it as it's recommended at the start of the debate, but I haven't actually experienced, there may have been one, but it certainly hasn't happened very often that this chamber can't actually debate and decide what it wants to do on the night that it comes to council. So I feel it's a very small risk that the deadlines at the other end of it would be impacted. So I feel it's a reasonable request that we should allow.
Councillor Davey, you're first in line.
Thank you. I speak against the motion. There are a huge number of, as Councillor Davis has rightly said, there are a huge number of people interested. Any potential change to making our parks and reserves, particularly all on leash areas, has met with a lot of concern, and I've had 2 big meetings with dog-owning groups in parks and reserves who've lobbied me extensively to ask that we maintain the status quo, and I have, in conjunction with the administration, who advised me that the matter would be discussed and decided potentially on the 28th of August, so there's a whole lot of them all geared up already to attend that night and even make deputations as well. So I can understand what Councillor Davis's concern is, but there are already a whole lot of other people out there, of our constituents, who are keen to see it resolved as soon as possible.
Any other, Councillor Monso?
Yeah. Is that right now?
Yes.
Okay. I won't support it. Well, I guess I've got a question first. Councillor Piggott said that he felt there hadn't been a precedent. Well, I seem to remember that I was had surgery and I missed a meeting that was very, very vital and important to me, and it was not rescheduled, and I did run a rescission motion as a result of it. So that is always an option that Councillor Davis has. If necessary, he can run a rescission motion on this. Can't?
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm just, my question is, can he or can he not then? But I think that there are always situations when there are people who are unable to be at council meetings for whatever the reason, and if we change things around every time that happened, we would be disturbing a lot of people and interrupting a lot of people. And so while I have my concerns about the difficulty and the impossibility for Councillor Davis to attend, I think that there'd be plenty of us who could take the advice, to get the information, including, of course, Councillor Piggott, when it comes to bringing information into the debate and discussing the issues that Councillor Davis wants to address.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Could I just ask, so when is the cat and dog management legislation or regulation due to be applied? Does it commence in January?
Through the Chair, no, the bylaws expire in January 2019. The dog and cat management plan is a refresh, so we've been working with the board to update that plan. As soon as council adopts it, it comes into force, but obviously it primarily relates to next year's activity anyway, so by the time it goes through that formal endorsement process, signed off by the board, it will be next year.
Okay, well, I'd like to speak. You know, I too have concerns about delaying consideration of that matter, because I, as many others, have had a lot of people contact me about it. I'm sure Councillor Davis could communicate with us about his views. You know, that I'm sure we would respect. And I really think that the people who are extremely interested in this do have a right to hear how we proceed, and we should push on with it well before we go into the period of abeyance.
The debate. Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Yes, just to clarify, were we going to consider both of the, because I'm just concerned about one of the answers that were given, we weren't going to consider the bylaw and the management plan on the same night? There'd be two separate reports on the same night, or?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. They are completely separate reports, but they are on the same evening. Yep.
Just speak.
Thank you. Just remind me again, when's caretaker period begin?
Through the chair, it's on the 18th of September.
Thanks.
Debate's over. Councillor Davis, you may sum up if you wish.
Yes, I would. The thing is, yeah, so there's been a couple of points that made by Councillor Monceau in terms of every time that there was somebody away that we'd have to change everything. It actually happens incredibly infrequently. I think this is the only time I can remember actually doing this. So, this is a once-off request. In terms of the issues that I'd like to bring to the debate, yes, that's part of it, but also my vote. And a number of my constituents are very interested in this. I have a number of dog owners. I've been meeting with them over the last few weeks. And unfortunately, that's when this report was to be coming back, and we booked that a long time ago. And as a representative, I would like the opportunity to vote on their behalf in this matter. And I would hope that you could understand that. I understand that people are, perhaps some people may be expecting it to come back in August. However, from their point of view, I believe that they would be happy to have that informed debate, but also have more councillors voting on this. So I ask you to support this. It's a 2-week delay. I believe the administration can deliver it on time, but I hope that you can accommodate this so that I can represent my community.
Okay, I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is lost. And I suggest, Councillor Davis, that one, you have a good honeymoon, but two, that you inform your co-councillor very as much as you can about the issue and what you have learned. And I would be quite surprised if this chamber had much division on this matter, to be perfectly honest, but we'll see. We now move on to reports of officers, and we have 8. I will read them out. Please signify if you wish to pull for debate. The first is the CEO report for July. Councillor Monceau. Highbury Landfill Authority, Councillor Ford. Nomination for members of GEROG, I will pull that just because I think there's some information you need to know about it, and we'll see where it leads. Annual report on section 270. That hasn't been pulled, so there's a recommendation on page 111. Can I have a motion to that effect? Move Councillor Wilkins, seconded Councillor Davey. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. We now move on to several policy fiddlings or upgradings. The first being the whistleblower policy. Anyone wish to pull that for debate? Then there is a recommendation on page 115. Can I have a motion to that effect, please? Move Councillor Lemon, seconded Councillor Lord. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. There is a request to discharge a land management agreement on 11 Christie Avenue, Toorak Gardens. The circumstances are reasonably clear. On page 195, anyone wish to pull that for debate? Then can I have a recommendation according to the motion on page 195? Moved Councillor Cornier, seconded Councillor Ford. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. There is policy review on curbside waste management on page 213. Again, an upgrading to but small stuff. Councillor Lemon, you move to this effect. Seconded, please. Councillor Cornish, all those in favour? Against, that's carried. And the public lighting is an interesting issue. Councillor Pickett, you wish to pull that one? Okay. Councillor Monceau, the CEO's report on page 9.
I'll move it in accordance with the officer's recommendation, and I just wish to query one comment in one item in the report in relation to the on-track Wriggle Republic Theatres lease renewal. I had some residents contact me about knowing it was coming up, or because they were told back in April that it would be in the August agenda, and I just wanted to know if it was scheduled for the next council meeting.
Through the Mayor, yes, it is scheduled for the 28th.
Thank you. Then I have nothing else to say about the meeting.
Then you move the officer's recommendation. You have, haven't you?
Already.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davey, all those in favour?
And I've just got a
You wish to
question.
speak to it? Sorry, yes.
Just a quick question. We moved some funding for a local history officer in the library, to be located in the library, I think 2 days a week. And I just wonder when that position would be filled, please, or when that's likely
Well,
to
it's
be
been advertised. I've seen it.
Through the Mayor, yes, that has been advertised, so it's going through the finalisation processes and, finalising the recruitment now. So it should be finalised in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkins?
Yes, just a query on page 11. The urban forestry officer, is that still being recruited? Is that in addition to Ben Seamark? Can you explain what the role is all about?
Through your worship, they are existing positions that through a period of time there were several resignations. It required Ben Seamark being secured in his current position for the positions under him to then be recruited, and that's just the process that we're going through. So it's for a technical arborist to fill out that team.
Supplementary question, if I may, too. The development officer planning, that somebody is being recruited currently, have we advertised that, and have we asked for knowledge of heritage, and is that in the advertisement?
Through the Mayor, yes, there is aspects of that in the position description, and that one has been advertised at the time of the writing because of the process of writing the agenda, getting it through the approval process. That's a bit behind, so it's not on the website as we speak, but we're going through that process we're going through the recruitment process now.
And the word heritage is in there somewhere?
Yeah, I believe that it is part of that for all of the planning officers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Can I write a response before you do?
Response to what?
So move the motion.
Okay, yes, certainly. You write a reply.
I just want to make the comment, and follows on from the question that Councillor Davey asked, and that was responded to. My concern over that the appointment of that 12-month period, and I'm saying it so it is on record, is I did speak to Farley Taylor about that appointment, or she spoke to me initially, and someone in the library is filling that position on a temporary basis because, of course, the funding only applies from July 1 till June 30th. So, unfortunately, the expertise that I would have liked to have had for a full 12-month period will not actually be there for the full 12-month period because it takes time to recruit somebody. As I drive past Mitcham Village every 2 or 3 times a week and I see their sign hanging out the front, local history officer, I worry about that. Anyway, so I think I'm happy with the report, and
You wish to respond to that?
Yeah, actually, since you had those conversations, the executive team did discuss that matter, and we have taken the decision that while the budget bid was for the 12-month budget period, we are recruiting that position on a 12-month contract.
that is wonderful. Thank you very
Good.
much indeed.
I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carry.
I'll let
Councillor Ford, 14.2, Highbury Landfill Authority, page 19.
Thank you, Worship. I move the officer's recommendation, that the report be received rather, but in addition, I would move that the council submits that letter from the Highbury Landfill Authority and the report of Golder and Associates to the mutual liability scheme and ask whether they foresee any matters for which we are not indemnified.
Okay. So, let's see if the Secretary has that as you wish. The report be received. 1 and 2, Council submits the letter from HLA and the attached report to the mutual liability scheme and asks whether there are any matters for which Council, for which constituent councils are not identified. Happy with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's your motion. You may speak to it.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I do thank the authority for their report and their letter. I do have some concern though, because what they basically say is that they do hold insurance for the infrastructure, that supports the flame, etc. But they basically defer all other risks to the mutual liability scheme. And the mutual liability scheme, as we know, does have certain discretions about what it may or may not indemnify. And I think it's probably relatively low risk. If you look at the report of Golder and Associates, there are some medium level risks. The one that does concern me, the sleeper there really, is the potential to contaminate underground water resources. And they only sample that once a year. I think there is potential risk there, maybe relatively low, but I would like to know that the mutual liability scheme will not have to be dragged kicking and screaming to support us in the event of such an occurrence. And I think that it would be prudent for us to ask them to comment on those matters.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Councillor Davis, you wish to second the matter?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. I think it's a very prudent thing to do, given the risk of the Highbury Landfill Authority, to simply ask the question of our insurer. So I'm more than happy to support this.
You wish to speak on the matter?
Through the Mayor, as identified in the letter from the Highbury Landfill Authority management, the management itself and the management of risk is actually approved by the Environment Protection Authority through a post-closure plan. So the Golder report was actually prepared in response to the EPA's requirement for a post-closure plan that dealt with the risks. It's not simply a matter of saying that if groundwater becomes a problem, we give that issue straight to the mutual liability scheme. We would undertake conversations with the EPA first and foremost. We'd understand what the EPA's position is with respect to that risk and what we could do to mitigate that risk in the first place before simply saying the risk has got to a point where we require the mutual liability scheme to intervene. There's a series of processes before you actually get to the MLS.
So then, CEO, given the motion before us, is there a better way to word that, which better suits the circumstances as you described?
Through you, Mayor, I think what Councillor Ford has suggested is perfectly fine, but what the mutual liability scheme will come back and say is, as long as you have a post-closure plan that's in accordance with the EPA's requirements and you're managing that on a regular basis, then that they'd be satisfied with that.
Well, in that case, let's let them write to us and tell us that.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Does the report from Highbury come to our audit committee regularly for review? Do they oversight it?
We do, as the audit committee, deal with Highbury, and we have had reports from them. Yes.
And my other comment is that the Golder report's 3 years old, and notwithstanding all that's just been said about potential risks, and I too am concerned about the risk of contamination of groundwater, there's not too much comment on how what performance measures are and the measures that are being taken to conform with all of the risks once they've been identified and quantified, which they have, and what they're actually doing to make sure that they don't, that they're managed as far as possible, because the last thing we want is any sort of contamination, both of air or the particularly groundwater.
Through the Mayor, on page 2 of the Highbury letter under Management of Risk, you'll note that there's a monthly report on landfill gas monitoring provided to the EPA, and that groundwater monitoring event in the current financial year, which will also be provided to the EPA. So there is regular monitoring and coordination with the EPA.
And I take that on board, I accept that, but we are a constituent council and we're liable in terms of our, well, we have liability in terms of our responsibilities to manage the site. I'd just like to see a little bit more forthcoming reporting. And so therefore I think the MLS oversight of it would be worthwhile as well.
So that you're speaking on in favour of the motion for that reason. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to the Mayor, because to the CEO, because he's had the history with this particular site over the years. And I read it, it's a lot of numbers. Can you, in your understanding of it, ensure that reassure us that the gas is not going to cause an explosion, even though it's being combusted through the South Australian Power Network system? I notice also that there's an incursion of residential areas in the northeastern corner of the site. It's not going to explode anytime soon.
Through the Mayor, I can't answer that question. All I can say is that there are monitoring wells that monitor the amount of gas that comes out. It's flared. So everything that's being done at the site is being done in accordance with the EPA's guidelines. There's a continual monitoring regime in place, and should there be any variances to that monitoring, that's reported to the EPA, and as I said before, there's a continual dialogue with the EPA about what happens.
And you hear about that?
Of course. I'm a board member, so yes, I hear about that.
That's great. Even though this report is 3 years old?
That's correct. The report is 3 years old, but the monitoring regime isn't. It's current. Yes. And until there's a requirement to upgrade the monitoring regime, nothing further will happen.
Councillor Piggott.
Thank you. Well, I support the motion. I think it's a sensible motion. In actual fact, I pressed my button before the Chief Executive just responded to the last question, so I was actually going to make sort of similar points. And I guess the points I was going to make is that none of these things are new to us. We've been dealing with the Highbury landfill for many years, and the issues around control of gas, concerns about water and close residents, and none of which are new. What is new is I think that we have a fresh enthusiasm about keeping an eye on it, and I think that's good from an elected body. But the fact is that it is being managed by a subsidiary who we have the CEO on as a board member, and does actually act very responsibly to keep an eye on it month in, month out. The report being 3 years old is not, I don't think, crucial in the mix, because the key play here is what happens month in, month out. So from that point of view, I think Highbury landfill, it's something, perhaps we prefer we didn't have, but it is well under control and has been for some time, on my observation. Having said that, I think Councillor Ford's motion here in terms of getting the MLS to really write down what's covered and what's not, And some of it won't be, because it is, you know, we're running a business here in a way. We are responsible for doing all those things as an organisation, and no insurer is going to step in the way of and get in front of that. However, they certainly will cover risks that we have, as they should, and I think it'll be a very interesting response, but I'm sure it will be very much as the CEO says it will be. So I support the motion.
Don't forget there's also a national expression of interest process about its future.
Do you want to raise that? You can if you would.
Just a further comment in relation to Highbury, recognising there are risks. There's always risk with a landfill site that's closed. The board took the decision, and I think that was communicated to council through the last agenda papers, to seek a national expression of interest process for the future use of the site. That expression of interest process wasn't limited to any particular land use. It was open, seeking expressions from anyone nationally as to what they would want to do with the site. And there are a multitude of things that can happen within that site. Solar panels as a solar generating facility has been talked about, but it's not limited to that. The financial feasibility of actually excavating the entire site and relocating it somewhere else and putting in clean fill, compacting it and putting housing there is also now financially feasible. So the authority is essentially taking that view to seek that expression of interest nationally to basically mitigate our future risks as well as minimise our costs. And we'll bring a report back as soon as that process is completed.
Councillor Davis.
I have a question of the administration through your worship. In terms of risk, is it not the case that year on year out the production of methane gradually reduces, and that is one of the reasons why the flare was put in place, because the reduction in methane could no longer sustain, the power plant was there, and that as the project continues, those risks that council face are diminished year on year on year?
Through the Mayor, that's absolutely correct.
Davey, you have a question?
Yes, just a quick question. Bearing in mind that this is in Tea Tree Gully Council area, are we having dialogues with them, and are they involved at all in any sort of planning or as part of the expression of interest process?
Through the Mayor, yes. The Chair of Highbury and the Executive Officer met with Tea Tree Gully Council some time back to discuss the expression of interest process and to understand what Tea Tree Gully Council's expectations were. Suffice to say that the local residents are reasonably happy with the status quo, because it's a site that doesn't generate any activity, it's flared, it's managed well. So Tea Tree Gully has expressed some concerns about future uses, because it certainly will impact on the surrounding residents, but that's another hurdle that will have to be dealt with in the future. I suspect that any future residential activity on that site will certainly increase property values around the place, rather than having a closed landfill. But so we are having conversations with Tea Tree Gully in respect of the expression of interest, but we also have continual conversations with Tea Tree Gully about our role as a good corporate citizen in their council area.
Meanwhile, the site has the healthiest herd of kangaroos in South Australia. Debate's over. Councillor Ford, do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Just before I do, could someone remind me about the duration of responsibility that we have?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, it's a 25-year post-closure process.
Yes.
And I believe there's still... I'm just trying to find the...
It'll be about 23 years to go, 22.
No, it's less than that, because it wasn't closed 2 years ago.
Oh, from the closure.
It's post-closure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
probably 15 years, something like that.
Yes. Well, thank you, Worship. I'll just be brief. You know, the purpose of this was really basically a mechanical risk reduction move. It's not to sort of create any hyperbole around the site or the concern. But nevertheless, I think it's a legitimate matter, and over a long period of time, I think we do have to be cautious in these litigious times. I think it's a prudent measure and commend it to you.
Thank you. I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Move on to item 14.3, which in fact I have pulled because it's nomination for members of the Greater Adelaide Regional Organisation of Councils, GAROG. It's an organisation of which you have not heard of before. It is set up to replace the Metropolitan Local Government Group. It is set up under the new constitution that was approved by the LGA membership at our last general meeting, and it is set up to better streamline the process of the board and the way people are and the representation that happens within the Greater Adelaide. You would be aware that the board currently has 16 members, 8 from the regions and 8 from Metro. The regions have always had themselves well organised. They have divided themselves into sub-regions. They have their own local committees, and those committees themselves appoint people to the board. And they appoint people, to what they call is SAROG, which is the regional equivalent, and they appoint people to the board. What this is setting up is the same system here. The big criticism has always been of, there's 2 big criticisms of the current arrangements, or prior to the new constitution in Adelaide. The first is that the Metropolitan Local Government Group, where all CEOs, all mayors get together 5 times a year, works passably well, but only passably well. It could work better. And one of the reasons is that we are a diverse group, and the GAROG is set up in potentially to mirror what happens in the regions, where the expectation is there will be 4 regions, four metropolitan regions, north, south, east and west. Each of those will appoint 2 by vote, 2 people to the GAROG, and GAROG itself will find 3 people, or 3 of them that go to a much more streamlined board. Unfortunately, the metros have yet to approve the mechanism of the sub-regions. So right now, before you is and I expect that will resolve itself over the next couple of years, but right now, nominations are being called to appoint 8 people from Metro to be the membership of the GAROG, which is to replace the MLGG, and from that group, 3 people will be appointed by themselves to go through to a streamlined board, and that's what we are doing. I have always, for the last 6 years, I have been on the LGA board, and you have very kindly nominated me as your representative, and I have always been well supported by the councils at large, and I have been appointed. I mean, you can't rely on it. I'm happy to declare now that I will stand for mayor next term, but I'm less keen to continue on in the representative role on the board and on GAROG for 2 reasons. Well, the primary reason is that they've had 6 years of me. They need new blood, it's been a good time. I think I've made a major contribution to a lot of things at LGA, but I'd encourage Burnside to consider an alternative. If Burnside were to tell me that they would, irrespective of what I've said to you, that I should at least put my name up for GAROG, I would certainly consider it, but I'm not proffering it, and that's where we sit. So you have a motion before you on page 81. where we, if we choose, we can submit a nomination to the LGA for a member on the Greater Adelaide Region Organisation of Councils, which would be voted on, as we have done before previously for the board position. So the councils will then look at the names that have been nominated, and 8 will be eight will be selected to go on a go. Councillor Piggott.
Mayor, I'm not sure I want to make a motion as such, but I would express an interest in nominating or being nominated by this council if it was the way it wanted to go, given what you've just said. I do feel that it is a position I think I made a secret that I am keen to continue as a councillor for my ward beyond this election, and subject to that election. I'd like to serve Burnside for another 4 years, and as part of that I would be interested in this nomination.
The commitment I would expect to be no more than MLGG currently is, which would be possibly 5 meetings a year, possibly starting at 4 p.m. on those times. Of course, if it were then be moved to an appointment to the board, that has a greater commitment. So thank you. So I've had one nomination. Councillor Lemon, do you wish to speak on this matter? No. Sorry, I thought you had to. Councillor Wilkins.
It was me. Okay, somebody else has got the speak.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Davey. If I can have you first, then
Thank you. Yes,
I've stuffed up myself here.
Has this motion, officer's recommendation, been formally moved? Or
No, I am only giving you a background to it. Unless we have a name, we got nothing to move.
Well, I'll just say I'm happy to second Councillor Piggott's nomination, or nominate him if he.
Okay. Well,
doesn't
Councillor,
isn't
I suggest then that you move the motion and nominate Councillor Piggott, and we can debate the matter.
I'm happy to do so.
Are there any other potential nominations? Councillor Wilkins.
Well, I was going to nominate myself. Yes.
My view on that is if Councillor Piggott is prepared to stand, I will support him in that role. Okay. I'll leave it at that. So no, I will not stand if Councillor Piggott's standing. So we have a motion before us, moved by Councillor Davey, that we don't need to indicate it. We don't need to. We need 1, 3, 4 and 5, rearrange the numbers and drop out 2.
Thank you, yes.
With Councillor Piggott in that position. I have a motion to that effect. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Davey? No, it is not. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lemon.
Oh, yes, I'm happy to second that, but I've also got a question. And my question is this. This is the timing on this. And my question obviously is to you, so I'll wait till you've finished having your conversation. The timing on this really concerns me because whilst I'm happy to support Councillor Piggott, there's a number of issues that the fact that we are, 8 weeks away from, 10 weeks away from an election. What's the scenario if Councillor Piggott? So it's just a casual vacancy on
the casual look. The issue, the timing is always going to be difficult, and that's well addressed in the letter from the CEO of LGA in there, it was thought that having the personnel in place at the time of the annual general meetings, the benefit of that far outweighs the possibility of the odd by-election. So moved Councillor Davey, seconded Councillor Lemon. Any debate? May I put the motion?
Perhaps
you wish to speak to the matter, Councillor Piggott?
Yeah. Well, I sort of feel that it's always a risk, I suppose. Didn't have to do a pitch. But that's what I wanted to do, really. I mean, I guess if I did have to do a pitch on our sort of 5-minute rule, the sort of things I would say, I guess, is that I have been here for almost 8 years, experience of local government, and like I said, I have committed to going again, and as Councillor Lemon certainly pointed out, that is subject to election. So, but on the basis of that, I'm certainly keen to be here for another 4 years. I have always had a very active involvement with local government, key responsibilities of local government, I think. I think finance and governance, particularly in here, planning on the DPA for a number of years, and champion waste for the last 8 years as well. So they're all key parts of local government that need to be looked at a higher level as well. And I think I do take a high level view on things. So from, not always, but from that point of view, I feel I am quite suited to the role. So I certainly, if I was nominated and successful, I would certainly work to represent Burnside well in the position.
Thank you, Councillor Pickett. I think you would do it very well. I think that you would be well supported by the Eastern region because you are well known through your role on the board of East Waste, and you are highly respected in that role. So you can expect a strong support from all members of East Waste, which is quite a slice of the East. So congratulations. I will put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. And out of that, you've got me committing to, I'm going to be running next term anyway, and God willing, I'll be here, a bit like everybody else. It got me committing ahead of time, but I think it's important that I did. We now move on to what is a very important and interesting topic, page 241, the public lighting LED transition options. And Councillor Pickett, you have the ability to show us how good your financial skills are by speaking to this matter.
I would like to propose the recommendation, unchanged.
Page 241, thank you.
Unchanged. Surprise, yeah, that's right. And look, this actually probably doesn't command too much of my supposed financial skills. The report's a very good report. And what it talks about is the opportunity to spend in the region of $1.6 million, which would effectively replace over 4,000 of the current lights with new LED lights. It would actually upgrade the lighting across 85% of the city, particularly the streets that are primarily pedestrian streets as opposed to the main streets. It provides us with an infrastructure that is far more efficient and far cheaper to actually run. So the maths on it is that we would spend $1.6 million in a hurry within the 1 year, which is proposed, which is what the motion says. We would get 4,000 lights around the city, and we would then begin to actually save in the order of $440,000 a year in terms of electrical consumption and maintenance. And so from that point of view, it's an unusual proposal in council terms, because generally we are committing capital into infrastructure that often has, it certainly has benefits to the community, but often has additional costs against our operating budget, that we then need to maintain it and service it. So from this point of view, it's unique in that it will effectively drop money back into the pot as soon as we do it. And so from that point of view, it's a very good deal. The only concern about it is its timing. We are 7 or 8 weeks into the financial year. We put a budget up to consultation earlier in the year that was accepted at the end of June that has, I think, $180,000 towards this purpose. And so what this requires really is another $1.3, $1.4 million in this financial year. But I think that is justified. One, for the reason I've just explained, is that it does have immediate positive financial effects. It does have immediate positive effects for our residents in that we've got better lights. And the other thing is the proposal to fund it out of effectively short-term debt across 5 years. The savings on our budget of $400,000 a year would effectively pay off that in 4 years. And while we need to be careful, I think, not to necessarily spend that $400,000 savings on something else in the next 4 years, the deal itself does stack up very, very well to the all-round benefit of residents straight away and to our bottom line ongoing, and also to the fact that we do have more efficient and more sustainable lighting. So from that point of view, it's actually a very easy proposal to get behind and recommend. So I recommend it to you, and I feel we should vote it up.
Councillor Montrose.
I'd like to second it. Yes, I'd like to second it. I'd like to second it, and I totally endorse everything that Councillor Piggott has said. And I really wanted to highlight the not just the immediate financial benefit, but the immediate benefit for residents is actually a health and public safety issue. And I wanted to add the South Australian Public Health Act to the policies and the statements there, because at the meetings I go to in relation to the redevelopment of the new regional health plans, one of the issues that we've discussed is public lighting and the importance of public lighting in relation to safety. When people have well-lit streets, they feel more confident to go out walking at night. And this kind of street lighting, if the images that were supplied to us are any indication of the improvement that the lighting will have on our streets, for public safety, I think that will be a really major issue. Not just for residents in terms of walking or walking their dog or getting in and out of their car at night, but also for the roads. And we do have a lot of roads, extensive roads through Burnside. It's a very big area, and I'd like to see some of that money that is recoverable go into putting in more lights, more street lighting in areas where they are particularly dark and particularly hazardous. And I think of some of the hills areas in your in Councillor Piggott and Davis's ward, and the same in my ward too, where there needs to be more lighting because it isn't safe. And there are some hazardous areas in the foothills that do need additional public lighting. So I'm hoping that that will be a benefit that can accrue as a result of the cost savings that we make on the replacement of these lights. So I hope we're getting the best price possible in terms of the replacement, but I think this issue is not just a financial issue, it's an environmental issue, but it is also a resident safety issue that is really important to keep in our heads. So I totally support it, in spite of the debt that I am always concerned about.
Thank you, Councillor Monceau, and you are right of the physical environment, but there's a dramatic decrease in the emissions as well, which are very, very significant. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions through you. Will there be any increase or any light spill, increased intrusiveness into people's homes? I read in the report that they're low glare, but I just wondered if there is light spill that people would notice from this different lighting.
Through the chair, LED lights produce less glare than the lights that are currently in play. So I think it's on page 283, it talks a little bit around this. And this has been rolled out extensively in the eastern states in particular. And the feedback has been that complaints have generally been very low in that regard. Having said that, it's still got the option to install shields if we need to, as we've got that option at the moment as well.
Yeah.
My follow-up question is, would there be any impact on wildlife and bird life in our parks and reserves? Has that been thought through or quantified?
They'll be able to see each other better. I don't know.
You asked for that.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Worship. I have a few questions. Can I ask, the cost of each light then is $400? So I presume they're not just changing the globe, so there must be some other, components, I take it. And when you think about this, in respect to the duration or the lifespan of these, this lighting, is it going to be necessary to replace more than the globe, in 15 years or whatever the lifespan might be?
Through the chair, the cost is, I think it's around $300 and something, $360, $380 a light. It's for a new luminaire, so it's not just a globe, it's the whole head fitting on the light, and that's a cost for the purchase of that and also the installation. So obviously there's a requirement to have cherry pickers and stuff there and people to be electrically qualified to do those installations. So that's the cost of it. At the moment, the lifespan on them is 20 years. The feedback from other states at this stage in terms of maintenance requirements is that they're performing much better than what their documented levels are. So it looks like they may even last a little bit longer than that.
And then,
you didn't answer Councillor Ford's question on replacement. Once you start replacing, it's globe only, not the whole infrastructure, I presume, which is a lot cheaper.
And then, how long would it take to roll out the plan, to install the lights?
Through the chair, the discussions I've had with SA Power Networks is that there's a lead time of about 12 weeks to purchase lights, and then the installation's a little bit dependent in terms of how many councils have got underway at that particular point, but they're saying anywhere in the realm of 4 to 6 months to fully install.
Right. Well, Your Worship, then I've an amendment. And the amendment is that the loan be a 3-year loan in point 3.
Sorry, your amendment is what?
To change the 5-year loan to a 3-year loan.
Well, you're welcome to do it. We'd certainly need some advice from the administration of what the effect of that would be on the economics of it and on our budget before we could debate it. But are you in a position to? Can you just? I'm happy to accept it as an amendment, but before I ask someone to second it, let's get some information on what it means.
Through the chair, converting the 5-year loan to a 3-year loan, the only difference it's going to make is the total interest cost over the period of time. The percentage we're getting from LGFA of 3.75, I doubt that will be any more favourable. But I'll have to do a bit more modelling to find out exactly what the implications are if we reduce it from 5 years to 3 years. So the only impact would be higher repayments because it's shorter duration of time and lower interest costs.
But we'd need, the assumption is, because this project won't generate enough cash to repay the loan in 3 years. Will it?
No, through the chair, no, it will not.
So
Because
there will be other impacts on our budget. We'll need funding from other sources. Whereas a 5-year loan effectively funds it from within.
Yes.
Is that the difference?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the answer we need. I seek a seconder for the amendment. There being none, then the amendment lapses and we go back to the original motion, which Councillor Piggott ran, and Councillor Wilkins, you're next in line.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Of the 4,000 luminaires that we're going to change, does that include the lights on our major roads, which are DPTI managed? No, these are just local roads, residential roads. Great. And I note in point 41 and 46, you talk about the federal government's emission reduction fund. Have we any more certainty than what is in the report? Do we know that there's another round before the next federal election?
Through the chair, we obviously haven't applied for this yet because council hasn't resolved that this is the way that you would like to progress at this stage. Having said that, as I've mentioned, there are a number of other councils who have done similar replacement programs who have been successful in getting that funding, and if we use that as a basis, it would appear reasonably likely that we would be successful as well.
Councillor Wilkins raises a point that I wish to take up, and that is, yes, this is not main roads, because main roads we share, either we share equally or we have no control over, but there's some we share equally with dip tie. The economics of this is the same for dip ties as for us. In theory, there's no reason why it shouldn't be. Our dip tie, but dip tie is not just dealing with Burnside, they're dealing with the whole of Adelaide. So our discussion's going with dip tie on this matter, and where is dip tie on, given that the savings must be equally great for them in.
Through the chair, I'm aware that dip tie are also looking at LED replacements, but having said that, the savings for V category roads are not as significant as they are for P category roads at this stage. The difference in wattage between an equivalent LED that you can use on a V category road is much smaller than the saving you make on a P category road. And V category roads are also much more expensive to change over. The lights are much more expensive.
So the answer is the economics isn't quite so clear, but they're onto it. Thank you. Councillor David.
Just touching quickly on a couple of points that I don't think have been mentioned yet. I'm quite excited about the smart cities concept as well. And for those of you who don't know, the smart cities idea is that everything is essentially connected in a large network, which requires less involvement from staff, and that these devices would automatically notify you. For example, say in a bin, for example, you have a sensor which tells you how deep the bin is and whether it needs to be emptied or not. And so that means that a council staff member doesn't need to go out and check it regularly. The same thing applies to these lights. It's my understanding they're smart city ready, which means that I don't think they will be installed with a sensor, but they can be installed with a sensor, which means that they can monitor the output of the electrical output of the light and determine whether it's dropping below what's the minimum or whether it's broken, which meaning that there will be a much faster replacement of these lights and a more keeping up to date of our assets, which I think is it's the way of the future. And over time, I think it's good that everything that we do is ready for that in many ways. Something which I understand this has actually been in the pipeline for quite a number of years, and these discussions about LED lighting have been ongoing, certainly since the start of from the start of my term. But one of the major benefits that I understand is that there'll be less fade as well over time. So mercury will fade so that it's still operational, but far less bright. And I've had complaints, say, on streets like Mile Avenue where they're not due to be renewed and they're still working, but they continue to diminish. So the output of those lights will sustain stronger for longer, which is fantastic. Not to mention the cost savings and moving towards a greener city. Thanks.
Thank you. And of course, we all must be aware that the economics of this is so favourable because of the cost of power. So it's extraordinarily high now, and it's changed it quite dramatically. Councillor Davey.
Yes, just briefly. I just briefly want to say I support this. From an environmental perspective, it's a real winner, and also financially. And I'd like to commend the staff for all the work they've done, because it's been a very long project and taken up a lot of effort. So I think this is a great outcome. So I hope everybody supports it.
Councillor Ford, do you have a question?
No, I'd like to speak, thanks.
Had your speak?
I asked the question.
No, you proposed an amendment, sir. That's your turn.
Well, I didn't get to speak to it.
You proposed your amendment, and it got beaten.
Well, you put it, and I didn't get to speak to it.
Well, actually, fair enough. Fair enough. I will let you speak.
Thank you. Well, I will support this, but I'm very disappointed about the financial aspect, in the sense about the funding of it. As you can see on page 247, there's a chart about the payback period and the net present value of savings, and it could have been done on a 3-year program with no debt. And when we are, right up against the percentile for net financial liability ratio, I think we should be doing everything we can to keep our debt down. And I also take on board what Councillor Piggott said, some concern that the savings from this may be not directed to the loan repayments that we should be addressing, this and many others, but also there's leakage out of this program into other areas, and to have tightened up the repayment period, I think, would have been a good principle. I think that the thing that does attract me to it is that it is, if we are going to borrow for it, at least it's for something where there's a productivity benefit, and I think that should be a principle underlying borrowing, and we haven't seen it to date, but here we do, and therefore I will support it. But I do have those concerns about the ever-expanding debt to achieve instantaneous gratification, basically.
You make a good point, Councillor Ford. What's most unusual about this project is that it washes its face financially, entirely. Normally the benefits associated with projects we undertake are not directly financial. They are measured in other ways, like a swimming pool or like a Galunga hub. The benefits aren't actually financial, but here it's not only directly financially beneficial, but it has the other spin-offs as well. It's actually most unusual. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Parkin. Yes, and I was just going to completely support this project. Thank you for all the work that's been done. This is something that our community would fully support. The environmental benefits alone, our community is extraordinarily strong on the environmental credentials in this area and want to see us do more in this space. So to be saving 550 odd tonnes of carbon dioxide a year, let alone over the lifespan, over $9 million worth of saving in the electricity bill, I think it's something that this community would fully support. So I'm fully supporting it.
Debate's over. Councillor Piggott, do you wish to sum up?
I had a question. All right.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for all the input. And yeah, look, it is a good project and a good report to support. So I also congratulate the staff. I would just pick up an issue on the debt. I think Councillor Ford will struggle if the only projects that ever get an outing in council have an immediate financial positive return, because one of the reasons you need government is actually to step into areas where that is not the case. Where the market is not going to provide this because there's not necessarily money in it. But it's an important thing for the community, and the government of all levels actually have to make it happen. So from that point of view, I feel that this is an unusual project. In terms of the 3 versus 5, I think the principle of making sure, and that really comes down to whoever's in this chamber at budget time each year, to make sure over the next 3 years, 4 years, that the $400,000 that has come off the electricity cost gets salted away, and effectively it's an added surplus for the next 4 years, and effectively goes off and pays off the loan. paying it off before it actually can do it itself, all that means really is moving around money. It doesn't, I think the five, whether the term, whether it's 5 or 3, it's a recognition of getting it paid for and not adding to the long-term debt. So all of that I think works really well. We've talked about budgets, and we've talked about emissions and carbon and all those sorts of things, but the best thing about this is that 85% of our city will actually have better lights in their streets by the end of this financial year. We should vote it up.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Well done. We move to section 15 of the agenda, and there is nothing on each of those categories. There's no council correspondence. Any other business? Councillor Monceau.
I just wondered if everyone was aware of the accident that happened at the bottom of the freeway last Wednesday night, about just before 9 o'clock. An enormous B-double lost its load, tipped sideways as it was turning right into Portrush Road. Fortunately, at that time of night, I came through the intersection about 10 minutes after it had happened, and it was down to one lane to go up to the hills. The semi-trailer, big B-double, open lid, full of concrete and metal, had tipped off, either off the trailer, it was very hard to drive and look at the whole accident site at the same time, had tipped over off of the trailer, or the whole trailer had tipped over, tipping out the contents of the load onto the road, which occupied the inside lane of the up track of the hills, to the hills. It also knocked out a traffic light that was being replaced on Monday morning, and the load, all of the, not the whole load, because it was a significant amount still inside the trailer, but then they would have had to have had time to get, there were, dozens of SES, etc. But it's something that I actually said a number of times when we had these previous dreadful accidents on the road. There has been a dramatic improvement on the traffic coming down the freeway and entering into Glen Osmond, Crossroad, Portrush Road, as a result of the reduced 60 limit. But the problem still is those large semi-trailers who go through the yellow light, and they're travelling at, they're under 60, but they are turning right with a very large, often with very heavy loads on board, turning right into Portrush Road. And this was an accident waiting to happen last Wednesday night. It was only not covered in the media so much because luckily, fortunately, no one was hurt and no one was killed. But if that had happened at peak hour, during the rush hour, in daylight, not only pedestrians using the crossing, but also cars sitting in those lanes waiting to go up the freeway would have been victims of the debris falling out. And I think that it maybe require our CEO to write a letter of concern to DIPTI in relation to, I've suggested that the crossing light marker on Glen Osmond Road should be moved further back down the road so that cars are not waiting right at the point where that semi-trailer tipped its load. If the cars were moved further back towards the service station, it actually could allow a disaster like that to happen again without potentially damaging anybody or any cars. So I still think that there is an issue there with right-hand turning into Portrush Road, and the disasters has already happened, and like I said, fortunately at a time that it didn't have a massive impact on pedestrian or motor vehicle traffic.
Thank you, Councillor Monceau. The CEO will write a letter. He's just confirmed he will. He doesn't need a motion to do so. The critical issue with that turn, as you're all well aware, is the camber of the road is wrong.
Correct, absolutely, yes.
And I don't see why that cannot be made better, and maybe that's something that the CEO can address.
Is that letter, can I just ask?
Yes?
Would you not address that to the Federal Minister and secondly the Premier of the State? Because it is Liberal Party policy to go around the outside of the hills. But also today, can I just make a comment that I was at Clayton Wesley today, And standing at the junction, I have never noticed it before, but the number, I know there's a lot of B doubles that go around down Portrush Road, but midday, there are about a half a dozen of them going north on Portrush Road. They were laden with very heavy earth-moving equipment, occupying a total B double in the middle of a residential area. It is absolutely unsafe.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. The solution to this, of course, is Liberal Party policy, and that is the Northern Road and Rail route to avoid Portrush Road and bring it on. Thank you. Any other business? There being none, there's no confidential items, so I declare the meeting closed at a reasonable hour of, what is the time? 8:47, and thank you for your attendance.